dark, kindle the spark in me. Hey everybody, on this episode of Flickr, I'd like to introduce you to somebody. His name is Mr. Hibbles. I don't know why he has that name, but my daughter made him out of clay and showed him to me and said, "Here, I want you to meet Mr. Hibbles." Well, it wasn't long. Mr. Hibbles has been on this planet for maybe a half an hour, and my daughter said, "I want Mr. Hibbles back. I need to unmake him, and I want to make something else out of him." It got me thinking. Maybe Mr. Hibbles has something to teach us from Jesus and the Sermon on the Mount. We've been taking this walk through the teachings of Jesus in this series, and we've entered this place where Jesus says, "You've heard that it was said this," and then he'll take a tradition that had come down, whether from the actual Ten Commandments or from later Jewish tradition or from the laws in the Torah, and then Jesus will give his interpretation of things. So we saw previously, Jesus says, "You know the commandment is don't murder, but I say to you, don't let your heart be filled with hatred. The commandment is don't commit adultery. I say don't even treat somebody like an object by treating them like they're just there for your gratification." In the next piece, Jesus says, "You know the commandments. You've heard that it was said, anybody who wants to divorce his wife," and notice it's men divorcing their wives is the assumption here. "Anybody who wants to divorce his wife, just give her a certificate of divorce and get rid of her." And Jesus says, "But I say no, you can't do that. Don't throw your spouse away." In fact, Jesus says if you end the marriage because of anything other than unchastity, of not being faithful to one another, you're breaking God's intention. Now, this is complicated, right? We live in a world where it is commonplace, where it's frequent, where marriages end for a whole host of reasons. And sometimes there are good, meaningful, valid reasons why marriages end, and why proceeding with a divorce is like pronouncing somebody who's dead that they're already dead. It's naming the relationship is already dead. Sometimes the problem is, over a long, long period leading up to divorce, somebody has decided to start treating the other person like they are disposable. And this seems to be the central issue for Jesus. That you can't treat other people like Mr. Hibbles. Now look, he's a fine fella, I guess, but he's made of clay. He's disposable. When my daughter gets tired of him, she can unmake him and use the parts and make something else. And when you're a kid playing with clay, that's fine. You can make a Mr. Hibbles and tomorrow he could become a pony. Who knows what this wad of clay will be tomorrow. But we can't do that to other human beings. And maybe, again, this is the core issue Jesus is addressing. Like we saw with the commandment about murder, like we saw with the commandment about adultery. Deeper than some external action is this fundamental problem of treating other human beings as less than. Treating other human beings as though they are not made in the image of God, as though they are not worthy of infinite love and respect and care. When I kill somebody, obviously that's me treating them like, it doesn't really matter, you're disposable, I can get rid of you. When I cheat on my spouse, that also sort of says, you don't really matter. And when you end a marriage, especially in the ancient world, where in some rabbinic circles, the tradition was a man could divorce his wife if she burned the soup and just had to say 3 times in a row, "I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you," and bam, there she is out on the street. In addition to having this fundamental relationship ended, doesn't have the social structure for her to provide food for herself or well-being for herself, or what will happen to kids in the picture, right? There's this all sorts of ways that treats the divorced spouse like they don't matter, like they are disposable. Jesus says that's the real problem. You can't treat another human being like this. You're here today, and then I decide I'm tired of you, I will unmake you and get rid of you. If that's right, if we're onto the right track with how Jesus sees the issue, then again, this means something for more than just our marriage relationship. It certainly means we don't get to throw people away, and that casually I can just say, "I got tired of you," or "somebody else came along, I'm done with you," and throw people away. But also it means there's a certain sense of not treating others as disposable in every other relationship in our lives too. That in every interaction, I have the ability either to treat somebody else as though they really are bearing the very image of God, Or I can treat them like they're only here in terms of what they can do for me. To treat everybody like they're just part of a deal, right? You're only worth interacting with them as long as you provide something for me, and when you stop providing something for me, I can get rid of you and move on to a different provider, a different vendor, a different deal partner. The world sees things like that. The loud voices around us in the world see everything in terms of transactions, in terms of making deals. I will enter into a contract with you as long as it's valuable to me, and when things change or I don't think I'm getting as much value or as much bang for my buck, I will go somewhere else. And the world in which we live assumes that's normal. And Jesus says, no, that's not normal. I can't throw somebody away just because I've decided it's not convenient to have them around anymore. I don't get to do that in my business life, in my family life, in my friend circles. We don't get to throw people away. That means recognizing other human beings really are these beautiful, infinitely beautiful creations that God has blessed us with right beside us. And that means when you meet a Mr. Hibbles, you appreciate him, and you don't just unmake him or throw him in the trash because you decide to do something else with him. I know, he's a childish kid's creation, and frankly, he's a little bit creepy to me. But when I look at him now, I am reminded that there are an awful lot of ways in my life already I have treated other people like this, here basically to entertain me, and when they stop being amusing, away they go. Jesus says, no, there's a better way. When people aren't treated like they don't matter, when people aren't treated like you can throw them away. What would it look like in the rest of this day? Not just in our marriage relationships or family relationships, but what would it look like in every part of our life if we treated people as though they were blessed, beautiful gifts of God who can't just be crumpled up and gotten rid of? Let's join the conversation in greater depth next time.